What is going on, you guys? My name is Matt, and I know what you're thinking, and no, I have not received my letter to Hogwarts yet. I've been told it's in the mail, but I feel like it's taking way too long. This is the point where you'd expect me to talk in a British accent, but no, I'm better than that. I've got a very interesting episode for you guys this week, a lot of cool error cards to show, so let's get right into it. Alright, kicking things off, we got a... Alright, kicking things off, we have a first edition Misdreavus, which is a double holo variant. What I like about these double holo variants is each card, there is a different way to tell whether it's a double holo variant or not. And for Misdreavus, you can see that there is just a lot more holo everywhere, but especially you can see the holo in the eyes. I think that is such a cool feature, and also the white border around Misdreavus is filled in, so it's just black. So a lot darker card in general. And you'll see in the description I put here, the first edition cards are a lot rarer for a double holo than the standard edition. And so that's why this EVI or error value increase is very high compared to some other cards. This card was listed for $895 but had a best accepted offer price of $775. Next up, we have a base set Wartortle with the evolution box error. So you can see Wartortle there on the main part of the card. And if you shrink it down and put it in the upper left corner, that is where the error is. This is a repeating error, and this is one of my favorites. It's a classic in the error community. And this card always goes for a higher price. This card was listed for $120 but had a best accepted offer price of $100. And with an error value increase of 6,150%, that is number 5 this week on our list of error value increases. Next up, we have a Shining Gyarados from Neo Revelation, and this is a double holo variant. You can see this is a standard edition, so technically it's not as rare as the first editions, but this card had an insanely high sale price for a PSA 9. This card sold for $1,165.20. I might have jumped the gun there a little bit. Let me talk about the card a little bit more. So for Gyarados, the best way I know how to tell is just there is just a lot more holo around it, and it does seem a little bit darker. The non-error card does not have a white border around it, so that is not missing in the double holo variant. Yeah, in my opinion, this might be harder to tell if it's a double holo variant or not. And I am adding something new to this series. Thanks to the user NameName319, I will be ranking the top 5 highest sale prices. I think this is an awesome idea, and I always love receiving feedback from you guys. This show is for you, and I want to make it as interesting as possible. So this sale price of $1,165.20 was good enough for number 3 this week as our third most expensive card. Next up, we have a PSA 8 Haunter from Fossil Set with the blue stain error. Now this is a repeating error, and you can see that there is a smudge right to the right of Haunter there. And even though this is a repeating error, there is a degree to severity. I'll show examples on the screen here. You can see that the most severe has a really strong blue streak that actually goes outside of the holo box a little bit. And there are some very minute errors where you can see just a tiny little smudge. I think on each sheet that got printed, this blue smudge got less and less. And I would say that this card is somewhere in the middle for that severity. The description says this is a population 3 for a PSA 8 stain error. If that's true, that is awesome. And this card was listed for $700 but had a best accepted offer price of $500. Next up, we have a Lucario from Brilliant Stars, and this is a miscut. Now the front and back of the card have the same exact miscut. On the front of the card, you can see holo on the top portion, so it is that miscut where it's showing that. There's the alignment dot on the top right corner too. And on the back of the card, there is a white line on the top, which indicates that this miscut was actually on the edge of a sheet. And it's my understanding that edge of sheet miscuts are rarer and more expensive than the other cards, which makes sense because there is less edge of sheet than the rest of the card for all the different cards that are on the uncut sheet. I'm rambling now. $53 is a very solid sale price for a modern card. And with an average non-error price of $2.37, that gives the error value increase of 2,136%. And that is good for number 10 on our list of error value increases. Next up, we have a Beckett 9.5 Vaporeon from Jungle Symbol with the no symbol error. I always like when they include the subgrades, and you can see this is almost a true 9.5. Centering is just a little bit off. Description says that this is a population 2, which I would believe. It's very hard to get that high of a grade, especially for a vintage card like this. And with a high grade like this, typically you get a high sale price, and that is true for this. This card sold for $550 this week. It had a very respectable EVI of around 400%. Once you get to these higher numbers for sale prices, especially for graded cards, the error value increase, the higher it is, I feel like it's more valuable, if that makes sense. Next up, we have a Steenie with what I would assume is a low ink error. You can see that this card is definitely quite a bit shades lighter than the card it should be like. It should be that nice green color, but this is more of a teal, I would say. Though I may not look it, I am a sucker for some good grammar, and reading this title for this listing hurt my soul a little bit. Error card Pokemon ink error. Steenie, clearly a ink error. At least throw an "an" in there and don't capitalize the A, please. My personal problems aside, this is a very, very interesting card, and it did not sell for nearly as much as I thought it should. The person who listed this card should have listed it for a lot higher. Maybe this is one where they're just trying to get quick cash here, but we've seen some cards, even just in these previous episodes, where they're going for $70, $80, $90 for a modern card, with just the artwork being a little bit different shade, but this whole card, the color is off. So I think the buyer got an absolute steal for this card. You can see this card sold for $6.33 this week. Next up, we have an Entei promo card, which is a Black Star promo, and this is a sealed miscut. I've never seen this before. I know you see these cards everywhere. These are not as rare as some of these other Black Star promos. But to see one sealed is one thing, but to see it sealed and have a miscut is very, very interesting. I guess there's no real way to tell what the rest of the card looks like. We can assume just from all the other thousands of Pokemon cards we've seen before, but you can see the top of the card is definitely miscut. So unless someone opens this up, which I don't think they should do because the value is with this being sealed, we won't know what the rest of the card looks like. But boy, did this add some value to it. Typically it goes for around $5.50. Now I'd assume that is just for a raw card that is not sealed, but $75 sale price is very solid for a widely distributed promo card. Next up, we have a CGC9 Dark Dragonite with the no hollow error. I always like to explain these errors if people are unfamiliar. So bottom right of the card, it says 582. And that number is actually reserved for the hollow version. But there was one card that made it onto the uncut sheet that got mass produced, and that gave us this version where it says 582 for the non-hollow. And these cards always sell for a pretty penny. In the CGC9, this card was listed for $1,550, but had a best accepted offer price of $1,000. And the EVI of 2,085% is actually not in our top 10 this week. But it's number 5 most expensive this week. Let me know, should I have some sort of thing like a snap or a clap for top 5 most expensive? I should also say I'm going to be reorganizing kind of the layout of these videos pretty soon here once I have the time. I'd like to make these videos look a little bit more professional, so if I include the top 5 most expensive in addition to the top 10 EVI, I think that would be good. Oh yes, and so at the end of the video I will have a recap of everything, and I'll have everything blown up a little bit so you can see the details a little bit more. So I'll have the top 5 most expensive and the top 10 EVI. If you ever needed proof that PSA cards sell for more than CGC cards, I have it for you right here. Here we have a PSA 9, so essentially same grade as CGC 9. No hollow Dragonite error, but this one sold for more money, so obviously this is a repeating error, exact same error, supposedly the same grade. And I would say the reason people choose CGC over PSA is usually for their recognition of errors. I know this could change at some point here, but PSA doesn't recognize a lot of the repeating errors that CGC does, so in some instances it might make more sense to grade with CGC rather than PSA, but for vintage cards like this, I think sometimes you're safer with PSA, especially if it's a well-known error that doesn't need explaining. So this card was listed for $1,500, but had the best accepted offer price of $1,111. And the EVI is good enough to make it number 9 this week on our error value increase list. 2,327%. And is also number 4 on our list of most expensive cards. By the way, if you were wondering how I got this scar, it involves me sleeping and a fat cat named Leo trying to jump up on the headboard. I'll let you fill in the rest. Next up, we have a CGC Gem Mint 10 Wigglytuff with the no symbol error from Jungle Set. So yes, in the eyes of CGC, this is a perfect card. And it doesn't sell for as much money, again, as a PSA or a BGS 10. If you look under the non-error price per grade that I put in the bottom here, CGC 10 for a non-error goes for $175, PSA 10 goes for around $520. And if my memory serves me correctly, I believe the error price for this, for a PSA 10, is around $1,000, but the CGC average goes to around $500. And that is exactly what it sold for this week, $500. Next up, we have a base set Clefairy with the black dot error. Now, this is one of the larger repeating errors that you'll see. If you don't see it, I think you might need to get your eyes checked because it's pretty apparent where it is. So it is right under Sing, the attack, and covering the N and the O of now. And in my opinion, it kind of looks like a Sharpie that someone just kind of circled on there. But I think there's enough evidence to back it up that this is a repeating error and not just someone taking a Sharpie onto every single Clefairy that has this. Overall, this card is in great shape, and I don't recall what the typical error value increase is for this. I don't think we've seen too many of these come across in auction, at least not in my now 18 weeks of doing this show. But typically goes for around $10 for the non-error price, and this one sold for $80 this week. Next up, we have an Iron Jugulis Reverse Hollow from Temporal Forces, and this has the double print error. Now, before I talk about the card, if you look at the information I have on the bottom of the screen, it says Matt No Pokemon, and there were several this week that I did not know. I've never heard of this card before. So this is a very interesting error. This is actually from a seller, and I saw that they pulled this card just a few days ago, and they listed it right on eBay. They list this as a double print error, but I believe this could be called a misalignment error. So there's several different layers to a Pokemon card, and one of those layers got shifted down, and it looks like it's kind of the background, like the shadow layer that got shifted down. And so all of the text that should have that white background behind it is all down probably a good 7 or 8 millimeters. Interesting error. I have not seen this before. And again, I'd say my benchmark for a solid sale price for a modern card is around $50, and so this one sold for $81, so that's good. And with an error value increase of 6,594%. This is number 4 this week. Next up, we have a first edition Dragonite Hollow from Fossil Set, and this is the mirror error, or also called a no star hollow. You can see that the card on the right, the error card, has no stars on it, just a complete mirror finish. And yes, this is a repeating error. I believe every single hollow in Fossil Set has this error. Very clean card that looks great and had a very high sale price in auction. I think auctions are always fun. Sometimes you get less money, but you get money quicker, so it's a good balance. And this card sold for $585 this week. This is more what I'm talking about for a high sale price for a mirror hollow. So you can see that this first edition Lapras from Fossil Set has that exact same mirror hollow error, but PSA 10 first edition vintage cards sell for a lot of money. This one in auction with 47 bidders sold for $4,177. You will not find another card on this episode that sold for more, so this is number 1 on our list of highest sale prices, but an error value increase of only 38%. But again, when you're talking thousands of dollars, this is $1,000 more valuable than the non-error card. Absolutely love to see it. Next up, we have a Riolu with a misalignment error, just like that other one, but this one seems to have affected the artwork more than the background of the text. This looks like someone tasked a toddler to color in the lines for Riolu and did a very bad job. And one thing I'm noticing right now when I'm looking at the card, because one portion of the layer was kind of shifted over, it almost gives a 3D effect on the left side of the border. Very interesting. You never know what you're going to find with error Pokemon cards. Another reason to love this hobby. Average non-error price goes for $1.08, and with a sale price of $75, the error value increase was 6,804%. And you know what? That's good enough for number 3 this week on our list of error value increases. Next up, we have the OG. We have a base set Charizard with the black dot error. Look at the bottom of the card on the right, and Nintendo, there is a black dot covering a portion of Nintendo. And what's interesting about this repeating error is that every single card has the black dot, but it also has a holo shift. So a portion of the holo is actually shifted up, so you can see a thin portion of the bottom of the art box that has no holo on it because it's shifted up. There's just something about a repeating error that has everything the same like that. It just scratches an itch on my brain that I did not know was there, and it's always very satisfying to see. So a PSA 8 for this card definitely demands a high sale price, error or not. Average non-error price is around $500 for this. But this card with the black dot error in the PSA 8 sold for $810 this week. Next up, we have a Trico reverse holo from EX Ruby and Sapphire, and this has a line error. Now, there is not a description that was very helpful from the seller, so I'm just assuming that it's the line on the top there. And is this a print line? Again, sometimes my ignorance gets in my way here, and I just want to talk without really understanding. If this is a print line, some people consider this damage, but I never really think print lines are that bad. I think it does add character to a card. And this helped the card sell for a little bit more money this week, sold for $20. And I gotta say, this generation of Pokemon, while it's not my favorite, it might be the most nostalgic, because when I was a kid, it was, this set had just been released, and so I got to fully experience everything. I got to play the Game Boy games, I got to pull the cards and everything, so seeing this exact card, which I believe I have in my collection, it's fun. I like it. Next up, we have one of the older Pokemon cards that you will ever see. We have a 1997 Bandai Cardass Square Cut Charizard Prism card. So obviously the square cut is the error for this. It got graded a BGS 9. And me being unfamiliar with this card, I thought it was interesting that the round portion of the card is surrounded by another black border, and then so that square cut makes it look even more drastic, but I guess it's not that cool if you're understanding this card before, but if you're just kind of seeing it for the first time, I find it interesting. Not sure if that made any sense, but I appreciate you sticking around through my rambling. And one thing I found interesting is under the title of this eBay listing, in the light gray text it says, "This looks to be non-factory cut." So I'm not sure if eBay is experimenting with some sort of AI that can kind of read into cards and give their analysis or kind of give more information to the buyer. The more informed a buyer can be, the better the buying experience is for them and for the seller, I guess, unless they're trying to be a scammer. All that aside, this card sold for $1,200 this week, and this is the number 2 most expensive card this week as well. Next up, we have a Plusle from Pokemon EX Trainer Kit 2, and this has a misalignment error. I think this is called misalignment. I forget exactly what the term is, but basically where the front of the card looks normal and the back of the card is miscut, or in this case, severely miscut. And you can see this card was actually just shifted down during the cutting process and got misaligned like this. And I absolutely love, I can't even explain it, but I will explain it now. You see the little symbol over Pokemon, how that is miscut there, and then there's just enough on the top to replace that, so it's just like, it's this perfect yin-yang balance. Again, that just scratches another itch I didn't know was there. This card sold for a lot of money. $202.50. And I guess 2006 can be considered a vintage card, but even for this era, that seems high. I feel like there have been other examples of miscut cards or misaligned cards that didn't sell for this much. Sometimes you get people who get carried away, they really want a card in the bidding process, and this could be one of the few times where you actually make more money on an auction rather than having a best accepted offer price and just wait for a buyer to come along. Average non-error price for this vintage holo is $3.67, so that makes the error value increase 5,418%, which is number 6 this week on our list of error value increases. I'm going to be honest, I didn't know this card existed. Here we have a first edition Fossil Hitmonlee with a stain error and a mirror holo, giving it the official name of first edition Stainmonlee Mirror Holo. So obviously the Stainmonlee is referring to the yellow stain that is over Stretch Kick and a portion of the card. And then the Mirror Hollow is where it is missing the sparkly stars on the hollow portion of the card. I did not know that these two errors combined onto one card. It's a shame it's a PSA 4. You always want to see these cards get higher grades, but I guess we should be thankful that this card exists at all and not be complaining about the grade it got. Typical first edition Fossil Hitmonlee goes for around $24, and so the sale price of $222.50 is very impressive. Again, especially for a PSA 4. Very unique card, again, one I did not know existed. And I think it's always very interesting when you can double up on errors and have them combined into one very interesting and unique card. Next up, we have a Chansey from Scarlet and Violet 151 with the missing hollow layer error. Now again, I'm just some old guy who likes vintage cards, and so modern cards scare me. But kudos to whoever recognized that this was a missing hollow error. I feel like you gotta have some background knowledge to understand that this card on the right should be a holographic. That was something that would go completely over my head. I would probably just throw it in the box with the rest of the non-special cards and never see it again. But this is a very unique error, and you can see that was definitely reflected in the price here. This modern card got graded a CGC 8.5 and is sold for $300 this week. $300 for a non-chase card is pretty incredible. I think that's a good indication that you don't see this error pop up too often. So this error value increase is 3,900% and is number 8 this week on our list of EVI. Next up, we have a sealed Quaquaval from Scarlet and Violet that is a staff card. Couple things, I was not aware of this Pokemon, and I didn't really know the significance of staff cards. I did a little bit of research on it, and it looks like these were typically handed out to what they call league professors, event organizers, scorekeepers, and volunteers. So this is, I believe, how they test cards and just people who volunteer. I know there is certain qualifications that you need to have in order to get these positions, and these cards are given out to these people. And so when you see one for sale, it's assumed that it was either given away or sold from someone who received it directly from the Pokemon Company. And boy, does it sell for a lot of money. $245 for a sealed promo card, modern card. If you look above me, you can see that staff imprinting on the card there. And this is a high EVI, 7,001%, which is good enough for number 2 this week on our list of error value increases. Next up, we have a Sandy Shocks with a misalignment error. And if you're thinking to yourself, boy, this looks familiar, well, this is actually from the same seller that sold that other card. So this card was pulled probably a week or two ago and got listed on eBay and sold for $83 in auction. This one's a reverse hollow, so it's got a different air feel than the other one. And this one actually includes a printer hickey as well. So if you look at the center of the card, there's actually an orange printer hickey above the M in Magnetic Burst. Very peculiar. And that is reflected in the EVI of 5,290%. Again, this card sold for $83, but that EVI is good enough for number 7 this week. Next up, we have a Mewtwo EX from Next Destinies, and this is a test print card. We had one test print show up last week. I do not recall if this is the same seller or not, and I apologize, I'm not going to check. If you want to check and let me know in the comments, that would be awesome. But yeah, this one just displays the artwork and none of the text, essentially. So if you are more into that minimalist look, you have this card that you should be chasing, and clearly this one was not cut either because it is a test card, so it has those square corners. CGC just calls it without text. I think that's pretty accurate. And this got graded a CGC 7.5 and sold for $500 this week. The buyer did not list anything in the description for where they got this card, but I'd always be curious to hear how these test cards got out, because this one is, what, 12 years old now, and for it to be just kind of floating around, I don't know, again, was it in the pack? Was it somewhere else given out by a Pokemon ex-employee or something? There's always a story behind these cards, and I would always love to hear those. But unfortunately for this card, I do not have that answer. Next up, we have a base set Blastoise with the square cut error. I'm just kidding, this is not factory cut, or NFC for short. So what the seller did, or someone did at some point, this was an uncut sheet of Pokemon cards. They did a square cut here, basically. They cut it not in the factory, and then they sealed it up to make it look more official. So I guess that adds more perceived value, but this really is nothing official. So keeping this in the plastic wrap would not add any extra value, unless there's someone who is uneducated, but I really don't think this adds any value. And this square cut card sold for $528.96. Next up, we have an Aggron from Ruby and Sapphire, and this is a Hollow Bleed. Pretty apparent. This is one of the more stronger Hollow Bleeds you would see. For this set, I don't think Hollow Bleeds were too common, and I think that is reflected in the price. This seems high, even for a vintage Hollow Bleed, but you always love to see these high sale prices too. So this card typically goes for around $9, but this Hollow Bleed sold for $111 this week. A strong Pokemon with a strong Hollow Bleed. Next up, we have a repeating error. This is a first edition base set Pikachu with the ghost stamp error. So the D and the 1 in first edition are missing, and you can see the stamp is very faded. And again, this is a repeating error. This one got graded a CGC 9. It says off-center for centering. That doesn't look off-center to me. Maybe it is. Maybe it's just a weird camera angle. That's right. No, I remember this one. Okay. So also it's listed as a CGC 4.5 in the listing of the card. So I don't know what the heck the seller was doing. They have 100% positive feedback, but there's some weird things going on with this card. So I guess you have an off-center CGC 9 ghost stamp Pikachu. I feel like this should have sold for more. You see, this one sold for $450. I was able to find comparable sales that were actually this exact same error, sold for $750. So I think buyer got a good deal, especially in the world of errors, where the more funky the card, the more valuable to the buyer. So with all this jumbled mess going on, $450 for this card is a good deal, I would say. And boy, we're on to the last card already. I feel like this recap always goes by too fast. I always have a lot of fun doing this, and it's fun to get to talk in front of the camera in front of you guys. But let's not get sappy, because we have an interesting card here. We have a Japanese goop gas attack, and this has an inverted back and is a miscut. Now, a couple things about this card. One, it sold for a lot of money. $500 for a basic vintage Pokemon card, Japanese, is very high. Now, second thing, you'll notice that there were no alignment dots on the vintage Japanese Pokemon cards. I'm trying to remember if Japanese cards in general have alignment dots, but I know for sure vintage cards did not. So if they did, clearly that would show up here. Third thing, on the bottom of the card, you can see that there is a white strip there, which means that this is actually the edge of a sheet, which I would say definitely added to the value of this card and made it more desirable for collectors. And the fourth thing, I think that's number 4, vintage Japanese cards were known for higher quality control, and so to have a card like this that is inverted and miscut get out of the factory without being spotted during the quality control check is pretty incredible. This is a very unique card, one of one almost, one might say, and you can see average non-error price is $1.69, so that makes the error value increase 29,485%, and is obviously number 1 this week on our list of error value increases. So that's it. This is the end of the video. You can see around me, I think if editor Matt did his job, we have a larger view of the top 10 error value increase cards. And also we have the top 5 most expensive cards. So if you stuck to the end of the video, I appreciate the hell out of you. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.